Okay. Hello, we are glad you are all with us today. In our last issue, we talked about the updated American Academy of Pediatrics guidance regarding children and digital media use. And we wanted to go deeper into this and how it affects and relates to our children. And we welcome our expert, Dr. Charella. So, Dr. Charella, welcome. Thank you for being with us. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we start our questions?
Sure. I'm a psychologist. Over the course of my career, I've worked at Todd Children's Hospital. I've been in private practice. Currently, I continue in a small private practice, and I also work as a consultant at a private school. All of my experience has been with children, adolescents, and their parents. And so I'm pleased to be here today and glad to talk with you, Michelle.
Oh, thank you so much again. All right, we'll start with our first question. So, summer often brings less structure, fewer supports, and more unstructured time. So, why can this increase both screen resilience and anxiety for children with special needs?
Well, it certainly increases that for all children, and perhaps more so with children with special needs that might have more restricted interests. Social media, for example, with children who are on the spectrum, autistic spectrum, can be much more of a liability because it risks more social isolation. So in the summer, if there is less in-person time, less in-person activities, then the student or the child might gravitate toward screens. And that increases the likelihood of social deprivation or not interacting with others. And so the other thing with autistic children is that their behavior, because of the autism, tends to be more restricted and their interests more rigid. So they are more likely to get really fascinated and somewhat obsessed with the various activity. Often I see children who parents tell me that they become very fascinated with certain YouTube videos, watching them over and over and over again. So, again, in the summer, there's less activity because they're not in school, they're not having to interact with other kids. So, I think it's incumbent upon the child givers to try to really promote other kinds of activity, whether that's summer camps, even if the summer camp is a week long, trips to the library, anything that they can do, play groups or days with neighborhood children, anything that they can do to help them resist that gravitation to these all powerful and very interesting screens.
Thank you for that. Parents often hear limit screen time, but that can feel unrealistic. What are some realistic supportive guardrails that families can put in place that actually reduce anxiety without creating that constant conflict that we run into?
Well, I think that, obviously in all of the social media outlets and the things that they're be involved in or watching, there are parental controls. So that's the first step to make sure that they have some control over what their child is watching and where they're going and what they're doing. The other thing that I tell parents is it's more than just restricting the time and that they spend on social media sites. It's a structured supervision, I call it, where they sit down with the child and look at various YouTube videos and look what they're doing online so that they can help explain to them what's appropriate behavior, what's not appropriate, what's safe, and what's not safe. So it's more about an intentional use rather than just letting them explore social media without any supervision. Part of the problem with social media sites is that they are unpredictable, that it has this infinite scrolling. I mean, they can go on and on and on, and there's no stop. It just doesn't end. And then they can target them with various algorithms that continue to reinforce their use. So if a parent is more involved, then they can help the child understand these kinds of activities and help them structure those activities so they don't become so addictive. What we're concerned about with all children, and maybe even more so with neurodivergent children, is the social deprivation that occurs in social media. It's the sleep deprivation. That's not negotiable. Kids need to have sleep, and the screens and the phones have to be turned off. The attentional problems. I mean, kids with ADHD already struggle with attention, and they're very attracted to these kinds of screens because they provide all kinds of bells and whistles to help them stay interested. So when you take that away, then they really struggle with attention and concentration. And then lastly, one of our real concerns is that kids can become addicted. Kids who have trouble regulating their emotions, and I have treated adolescents who then become very addicted to these kinds of activities. And then when the parents try to set limits, then it's a major meltdown. And this is especially true with kids who have some executive functioning problems, especially in their ability to control and regulate their emotions. They'll have significant outbursts, and when that's removed from them. So, the message is that we start young, we start early, and we start helping our children as early as possible. There are a lot of people, and I recommend, and I agree with this, that you shouldn't allow children to have social media unless they're 16 or other than that, a little bit more mature. So I think parents need to, at 8, 9, 10 years of age, if they're going to allow that to happen, then they have to be intimately involved in what's happening and how they're doing it. So it's structured supervision, and it is much more than just taking the tablet away or the phone away and setting limits.
That is such good advice and so timely because we're all dealing with this as our kids get older. So, as you mentioned, you're talking about the interactive piece of a family with the child or the young adult. But there are those moments when the transitions to off screen, it's one of the hardest moments for families. And do you have any strategies if the meltdown occurred, when it's time to stop?
Well, depending on how significant the meltdown is, and again, let's just say if it's a tantrum, then I have always instructed parents and suggested that if the child's having a meltdown or a tantrum and they're not hurting themselves, they're not hurting you, and they're not destroying property in the home, then I would walk away and allow them to have that until they can console themselves and they can start regulating their emotions. So again, Michelle, this is not you can. It's very difficult if you allow a youngster at 10 years, 12 years of age to be unlimited time on screens or YouTube or social media. Then all of a sudden at 16, 17, say, well, I think we need to start limiting these behaviors because now you're going to have a great deal of difficulty. So it's more important that we're going to initiate this behavior again under structured supervision. So if we're going to allow you to go on social media, here's the deal. You're going to start, and I'm going to be part of it, and then you're going to start doing it on your own. But there's going to be time limits, because other things are important for you to do, like sports and being with your friends and being with your family. So this is just going to be a part of your life. And then you may say, I'm not allowed, at this age, we're not going to allow you to go up in your room and just do it without any supervision. You can do it. You can do it at the dining room table, in the family room, somewhere where, again, there's interaction, and the message is this is more. This is sort of another activity in your life, but it's not the sole activity. So I think that you have to start in the beginning, and then you have to make these transitions, and you have to practice them. And again, you would have, maybe depending on the level and extent of the outburst, have to work with a behavior specialist to say, we're going to develop a plan where if you act out or if there is a significant problem, then there's going to be a consequence. And maybe part of that consequence is that you have to earn the right to use social media again. And then we're going to start it, but we're going to start it in a rated fashion, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, until you can transition without having a significant problem.
But that is, this advice is hitting home. Trust me. For many kids, though, screens are not just entertainment. They're a form of, like we mentioned, self-regulation or the social piece they're not getting. So, in your opinion, what would be healthier alternatives that could meet the same need, especially for children that have these sensory and emotional challenges?
Well, I think that, uh, you know, Obviously, unless a parent is going to say, we're not going to allow you to have a smartphone until you're old enough to take more responsibility, then I think this has to become an issue that is a challenge for parents. And it's almost like we're going to teach you how to be responsible, like doing chores around the house, and we're going to teach you how to be more responsible by doing things in the neighborhood for other people. We're going to teach you how to be responsible and accountable for your schoolwork. We're going to teach you how to be responsible and accountable for your cell phone use. And so it begin. I guess I can't say it enough, Michelle. It begins early. And so if this becomes part of the family's functioning, then it's a lot easier than to structure that supervision rather than just to allow the child to have that. So that you might say there are going to be timeout periods. For example, if your family still sits down for dinner, then all the phones get put away. I mean, more and more people now are wanting to take phones away from kids during school. I mean, I was just reading an article where now various liquor establishments are saying we're going to take your phone before you come in and you're going to have time out from your phone. So I think more and more people are realizing that we can have time away from the phone. And if that is instigated early enough, then the child learns that. The child learns is this is something that I do, whether it's social media, video games, television, but it's not all consuming for me. And so that, again, I would suggest then that becomes another parenting issue and maybe a parenting challenge that parents have to say, this is how we're going to do this together. We're going to do it as a family. Sit down and have a discussion. Like Sally's 16, she can have her cell phone for longer than you, Bobby, because you're only 14. And so make that a family discussion, help them set those kinds of limits so that they understand it. And then be strong when they say, well, everybody else does it. Well, not here, not in our family.
So, one last question for you. So, what would be your one piece of advice to parents who feel like they've let it go too far with screen times and they feel like stuck and overwhelmed, but they have guilt? Where's the first step they can do to do
Well,
the
the first
right
step,
thing?
I guess you already mentioned it. The first step is for them to realize that this is an issue and this is a problem. One of the things that I mentioned earlier is one of the concerns we have about social media and video games is addiction, because these things are, especially with the algorithmic targeting, these things are highly reinforceable, and it does affect the brain, and it does have the ability to create dopamine spurts. And so that dopamine is much like gambling or drugs. And so it increases the likelihood that they're going to have an addiction to these kinds of behaviors. And then, how we already mentioned, certain kids with certain conditions like autism already have the propensity to become obsessed with certain things and very rigid. And then kids who have difficulty emotionally regulating themselves can help use these things to soothe and to comfort themselves. And that's appropriate, but again, there has to be limits. And so I think that parents need to understand that when it gets too far, when it is creating problems for the child, in other words, they're not sleeping, they're not spending time with family, they're struggling in school, they're not. He used to play baseball, but he doesn't do that anymore. He used to go with his friends, but he doesn't do that anymore. If it's creating a lot of stress in the families between parent and child, then it's time to seek professional assistance, because these kinds of problems are not easily solved even with professional assistance. But I think if you were to seek professional assistance from a mental health perspective, or individual professional, they can help you to better understand the problem and to better develop a plan to approach it. Because when it's that bad, when it's that, as I described, it's sometimes very difficult for parents to do it on their own, and they need help.
Dr. Trella, thank you so much for sharing something and sharing this advice to families that I guarantee are all going through the same kinds of struggles with these devices and social media. So we so much appreciate your time. Thank you very much for being with us, and we really do appreciate you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me.